Hey, my name is Ben Friedman, host of Ben and Bran See, a movie, and I just wanted to talk about today's episode, which is on video because I have with me Mr. Jeff Sneider. And Jeff was so gracious to join us. I invited him on a few months ago to join us in discussing Wes Anderson's filmography, specifically Moonrise Kingdom, which was a movie I knew he quite enjoyed. And he was so gracious to say yes. For those of you who do not know who Jeff Sneider is, he is a reporter at The Ankler. He is an editor at Below the Line. He is a columnist at LA Magazine. He is genuinely a great guy. I have been a fan of Mr. Jeff Sneider's for years before getting to do this podcast. He was somebody that I read in college that helped me discover my own writing style in film review. He is somebody that is so honest, and I love that about him. He is somebody so willing to just say what is on his mind and not worry what other people think. It's one of the best characteristics you can have when you're doing film criticism, because you know it's coming in raw, unfiltered, and it's exactly what you want to hear when someone is reviewing film criticism. So often we try to sanitize ourselves that it's just so refreshing to hear somebody talk so boldly about this. So I'm really honored to have Jeff on the podcast. We had a really great discussion. Can't wait for you guys to hear it. Like I said, check out Jeff Sneider. He's the InSneider on Twitter. He has a great website, which I will link below in the description for this podcast and for this video. Gives Jeff some love. Thank you so much for joining me. Check out the insnider.blogspot.com. Great resource. I use it all the time. It just helps me find what movies to be watching in the year 2022, because he watches so many movies that I haven't even heard of. So check him out, guys. And again, thank you, Mr. Sneider, for joining me. One more thing before we go into this episode, I did just want to make sure it was clear. This episode was recorded March 21st, which was a few days before we found out the news about Bruce Willis. Obviously, Bruce Willis is in Moonrise Kingdom. And while we are very praising of Bruce Willis, I just want to make sure that when we talk about him and we talk about his career, at the time, me and Sneider were not aware of what was going on. That news broke about a week after it recorded. So I did just want to say that please do realize that when we discuss Mr. Willis, his career and his role in this movie, we are discussing it about a week before all of that. So much love to Bruce Willis, what he is going through right now. I cannot imagine. You are so beloved by many. You are a great actor, and you are in the MVP Hall of Fame of the actors. So we thank you for all your work there. But yeah, just wanted to put that preface out there before we started. And with that all said, I'm going to throw it over to myself and Jeff. So thank you, guys. I hope you enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ben and Bran See, a Movie presents The Wild Wild West, where we break down all of Wes Anderson's filmography. Joining me today is the one and only Jeff Sneider. Jeff, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm doing better than Bran, I've heard.
Yes, Branson is out for a little bit. He'll be back soon, hopefully, but for the time being, Jeff is joining me to co-host this episode. He's no longer a guest. I promoted him as a co-host.
Yeah, really. Look at that. I just got a promotion in the last few minutes. Sorry, Bran. It's now the Ben and Jeff show.
Sir, I am really excited to talk to you. When I was corresponding with you, I told you when I was in college, the articles that I would read when studying writing, journalism, and all that, you were one of the guys I'd read just because of how influential, and your honesty is just superb. I've never seen a guy who just cuts straight through all the BS and goes for it.
That certainly made me abrasive in some corners of the internet, but yeah, but there's a lot that I don't know about a lot. But when it comes to watching movies, I'm not going to let someone else, pretend to be the expert. Okay. I've been doing this a long time, seen a lot of movies, and I'm excited to talk about this one with you.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I always find it so interesting to talk to my guests to see where their love of movie begins. So where for you do you remember film playing a significant part of your childhood?
It's a good question. I mean, God, I'd say like the earliest movies that I can remember seeing are like An American Tail when I was like really, really young, and then maybe like Nine Inch Nails, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Ghostbusters 2. So I would say around like 89, 90 is when I remember sort of starting to really like movies. But I'd say I fell in love with movies watching horror movies. That, like, it was, you tell me something that I can't do and I'm gonna try to do it, right? That's just kind of natural human behavior. And so yeah, these super violent, gory horror movies, whether it was Chucky or Freddy or Jason or whatever it was, I mean, you know, it was the perfect time for someone like myself. Like, I probably watched Freddy's Dead when I, you know, like 7 or 8 years old. And so I just love that stuff. I loved the feeling of being scared. I loved scaring my younger brothers eventually. And I think that is how I eventually fell in love with movies.
I'm sure that made you the popular brother in the household, scaring your brothers.
Right. Dude, I was bad. I used to, with my youngest brother, Jordan, I used to hide in his closet at night and pop out when he was like starting to fall asleep. And I either had a Freddy mask or I'd call myself the Night Stalker, which was like, I don't even know who the Night Stalker was back then, right? It's just like a badass name. But yeah, I'd say it rubbed off on me in maybe a couple of creepy ways. But, you know.
Was that always your avenue horror, but specifically like slasher, like Freddy, Halloween, Friday the 13th? Was that always your preferred genre within horror, not maybe the mythological versions?
Yes, I would say so. I definitely gravitated to the slashers and serial killers and that kind of stuff. And I still do to this day. I still, you know, those are the, you know, I watch the true crime documentaries and I read crime books and detective fiction. And I don't know, I've always had that dark sensibility, I suppose.
Which is, speaking of which, is the reason I ended up seeing X this weekend, was because of all the rave reviews I heard from you, from Perry, from really everyone on Twitter who I loved it. Absolutely was just engrossed by it. I thought Ty West just had such a direct vision with the story and knew exactly what he wanted to do. And I thought it was just a fun throwback to kind of the Halloween, Friday 13th era of horror, which we don't get. And it was so funny.
That's the thing. I thought the humor was really good. I thought the kills were really good. And it had some emotion, you know, an emotional undercurrent running beneath it.
Yeah, totally agree. Kid Cudi to me was just, so many scenes with him were just so darkly comedic and mixed with Mia Goth. Jenna Ortega's quickly becoming just one of my favorite like scream queens just in the past few years. So yeah, I was truly impressed with it. Jeff, I do want to ask you, because what exactly, for people who do not know you, how do you work in Hollywood? Because you're not a typical film journalist. You do a little bit more than that. Could you explain that?
I do a little bit of everything, I would say. Like, I don't consider myself a critic, even though I do perform criticism from time to time. I'm like, listen, these days I am an editor of Below the Line. I'm a columnist for LA Magazine, and I'm a reporter for The Ankler. So I have those three things going, but traditionally I've just considered myself like a film and television reporter whose job it is to basically specialize in casting news.
And one of the cool things about you is you've broken the biggest stories in Hollywood. I mean, from the Star Wars story that you broke last week, where it was, I believe, is Damon Lindelof is how you pronounce his name?
Lindelof, yeah.
Lindelof. You broke that story. I know you've broken just so many cool ones. How stressful is that? Because I'm imagining you're competing against everybody in Hollywood to get that story, because everybody wants to publish that.
It is very stressful. It's why I have no hair here, Ben. And the hair that I do have is gray. Yeah, it is a very competitive space, and film specifically more so than television. Television, they're a little bit better behaved. Everyone's singing Kumbaya a little bit more. You know, there's like the Television Critics Association, or you know, and then that's more like reporters and whatnot. But yeah, film is the wild, wild west, man. We are vicious. And we don't really spare each other's feelings. And I mean, listen, at the end of the day, we can still be friends. I'd like to think for the most part. But yeah, when we're out there on the field, you're playing for keeps. You're playing for bragging rights, and we go hard. So it is very stressful from time to time.
Yeah, the things that you break with the speed, because sometimes you see it where you're getting the scoop about like 5 minutes before another guy tweets it out. So I'm just like, every time I'm just like, gosh, that's just like, you got to be going so quick. And I know, because I have friends who work in the agency as well, who they'll be telling me stuff on that. And I'm just like, wow, it's just like, because I know also you have to play not kind, but you have to play along with the publicist a lot of the time, which is an aspect of the job that if you've never done that work, you don't know how annoying it can be at times.
It's very tricky. You have to find the proper balance, and you have to walk a fine line, because yeah, you want to have a good relationship with these publicists and these companies, because not only do you want to, have a good rapport with them, but you want to get invited to the screenings and the parties and the events. I mean, those are the perks of this job, right? But at the end of the day, you can't let those perks blind you to what the job is, which is holding these people accountable and speaking truth to power. And so, yeah, there are times when you have to, go against a publicist's wishes and say, no, I have this, I'm going with it, whether you like it or not, whether someone else is holding, I don't care. This is news and it's happening right now.
Yeah. And one of the things
but Ben, real quickly, feel free to introduce me to some of your young friends in the agencies, because I did all the breakfasts and the drinks and all this stuff when I was a young reporter, and now I'm older, and the people my age are making movies, right? They're not they don't have time to pay attention to everything that's happening, right? Because they're busy with their own projects. So I need to meet these young people, these young assistants and whatnot. So if you know anybody that I should meet, you let me know.
I will tell you off air, because I get stuff from them that I don't want to ruin that relationship either.
Of course, off the air.
One of the sites that you didn't mention that you work for, and I think it's one of the most valuable movie sites online, is just the Sneider blog post.
Thank you for saying that.
I reference it all of the time because I don't agree with a good chunk of your opinions, maybe like 50% of the time. But here's what I will say. When you put a movie in the good/best of the year category, it automatically hits my radar. I saw Coda. I was planning on seeing it already, but after I was listening to you, others rave about it, that quickly went from, okay, I'm going to watch it before the Oscars, to I'm going to make sure I get it done before 2021 ends, and absolutely loved it. And with that said, I did not listen to you on The Power of the Dog and absolutely hated it. One of the boringest movies I've ever watched. So slow.
It was something, man. It was something.
I don't understand the praise for this movie. I'm not going to get into it because I know if it wins Sunday, we always cover the film that wins Best Picture.
Right.
And I'm just dreading it because I don't want to rewatch it.
I promise you won't have to. I really feel very, very confident in that.
You don't understand. There's nothing I would rather do than not watch that movie again.
I didn't love Moonlight or Parasite. I liked both those movies, but I didn't love either one. But I understood why they won.
Agreed.
I would not understand why The Power of the Dog wins if it does.
It's one of those movies that when people are asking me, like, which one should I seek out this year? I'm never going to recommend The Power of the Dog. I'd only recommend to like the slightest of audience who I can deal with that slower, melodramatic Western, all that. And even that is a kind of hard sell. The other ones, it's like, I always kind of judge things based on if my mom would watch it with me. And The Power of the Dog is a movie I could never get her to sit through. Where Coda and West Side Story, those are two really easy ones. Even Dune, even if I don't think she'd like the movie, she'd be in awe of the craft of Dune. But just, Power of the Dog,
I do the same thing with my parents. There's no way I would have gotten Dad to watch Power of the Dog. And if I did get him to watch it, he would have turned it off 20 minutes in. Coda was a real struggle to get him to watch. But by the end of it, he wasn't like, this is the greatest movie ever. He's like, but he liked it, which is like, it spoke volumes, okay, for him to even make it through that movie. Yeah, we're in such a bubble where it's just like, sometimes it's like, you think this is what everybody likes. And then it's just like, no, the films that relate to people are probably more of the line of Coda, West Side Story, those bigger, broader ones. They're just more easily accessible. And I think that's Coda's greatest strength, along with just its cast, which is just wonderful. One last question, because I know you're a Boston guy. Are you following the Celtics right now?
Of course.
Are you loving what you're seeing? They're doing great. I mean, I was pretty dispirited halfway through the season. They were like 25-25. I was like, this team isn't really going anywhere, but they have caught fire at the right moment. They've got the momentum. Yes, I am encouraged for a long, deep playoff run.
I got to see your guys play my team Friday, the Sacramento Kings, in a what was an embarrassment for me, but we're tanking, so I really don't care. As long as you guys destroyed us, I was kind of fine. But it was just, you guys got something really special with Tatum and Brown. To me, people who are saying like break it up, I do not understand it just yet. Like, I think they are proving themselves like bona fide stars in this league.
Yeah, I think they're both great too. You just don't get rid of two young guys like that, and especially like, they were dangling Ben Simmons. Everyone in Boston who I know was like, get out of here with that. We don't want.
Yeah, I did. Simmons, I heard Barnes, my guy Harrison Barnes, being traded to your team in like favor of like Marcus Smart. I'm like, why would you do that deal ever if you're Boston? And you guys had such young success with them already. I think they took LeBron to the finals at the age of 19 each. Like,
right. They got chemistry now. They've played together for the last years. I think we got some good big guys. We should give who is it, Milwaukee, a run for their money in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and you got rid of Kyrie, which is probably the biggest blessing you guys have done in the past 3 years.
Exactly.
But anyway, let's jump into Moonrise Kingdom because I cannot delay it any longer. And let me just briefly give the overview of Moonrise Kingdom, Jeff, if you will indulge me for a few moments. Moonrise Kingdom is directed, of course, by Wes Anderson, written by him and Roman Coppola. It is produced by Wes Anderson. This is this is the first project that Owen Wilson has no involvement in Wes Anderson's filmography in total. Sorry, I should say at least to this point. The music's done by Alexandra Desplat, and it comes out in May 25th, 2012. It has a budget of $16 million and it grosses $70 million, much more successful than maybe a few of Wes's previous projects with Darjeeling and Life Aquatic. This film comes out to critical praise. It is well beloved, and it is a really charming movie, I find. It stars Bruce Willis in a role that's very non-typical for Bruce Willis to be taking, especially in the 2010s. The first collaboration he has with Edward Norton, who would go on to star in Grand Budapest Hotel, Isles of Dogs, and have a scene in The French Dispatch. Stars, of course, frequent collaborator Bill Murray. Frances McDormand's in this movie, Tilda Swinton, Jason Schwartzman, and has the introduction of two young stars in Jared Gilman and Kara Hayward. And this film follows those two characters of Sam and Susie leaving their parents and going on a wilderness adventure across, I believe it is, I want to say, is this Massachusetts? I believe it's
New England. Yeah.
New England. Yes, you're right. New England. And that's all I need to kind of just get in to start this movie. Jeff, I'll kind of just give my hill to die on, which again, refresher, is my big, bold statement on the movie, my opinion on this movie. I think this is Wes Anderson's most accessible film for movie-going audiences. It has the eccentricities of a Wes Anderson movie, but it doesn't go too far off the radar, which sometimes he has the tendency to do, where it's still a very direct, streamlined movie that I think a normal audience can appreciate and understand. And it's also his most restrained movie. We don't have as much set pieces in this film, or houses or boat designs in a Life Aquatics case. This is very much a wilderness movie, and he's capturing nature and scenic imagery in a very beautiful way. So to me, this is one of his easier movies for an audience member who's like, I want to watch Wes Anderson. Where should I start? I think this one's an easy one to start with.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it is accessible. I think it's universal. It doesn't really matter what culture you grew up in, what part of the world. I think if you were 12 years old, you had a crush on somebody. And it really just captures, I don't know, the beauty of young love and that feeling. Those butterflies that none of us really know what to do with at that age. And so I just think it's so cute that, we have Sam and Susie and they run off together. Like, where, extrapolate that. Where do you, how is Sam going to work to make money to support the two of them? That kind of stuff. They don't care about that. They just throw caution to the wind, and they just want to be together. And yeah, there's something touching about that.
Yeah, I agree. And with that said, I think the element of that relationship that works so well to me is Wes Anderson never just portrays them as kids, like just in love. He gives them the respect to be their own characters, and he doesn't talk down to them ever within the film. So it allows these characters to feel completely fleshed out. They just so happen to be 12-year-old kids, which I think is a really beautiful story, because I think often what happens is there's a lot of times there's something more to their story, or it's really a story focused on the adults looking down on the kids. This one is the kids' story.
Right. It's from their perspective. Yeah, I mean, there's just something very romantic about it. Maybe it's the dancing to French music on the beach in your underwear kind of thing. I think also being a shorter Jewish guy, something about like, she looks so much older than him and more mature. And he's working so hard to like be masculine, and prove his worth to her. I don't know. It foreshadows what it's going to be like 6 years later, when they're both 18 and really entering the dating world and whatnot.
As somebody who grew up also a young Jewish boy in Cub Scouts, this movie does also feel very familiar, where they get some of the eccentricities of Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts down to a T, even with just some of the weird leaders you see in there, where you're just like, these are the ones responsible for for children. And they do that really well. I just want to start this movie where it all begins, where it's these two characters running off, and we're slowly introduced to each character. The character for me because I haven't rewatched this movie. This film comes out in 2012. So I
can't believe it's been a decade, by the way.
Yeah, I'm 13 when that movie comes out, and I'm seeing it. I remember seeing it in the theaters, because this is at the time where I'm now starting to just watch any movie that I'm hearing good reviews on. And my parents never cared what movie I saw. So I was seeing, from G to R, basically just without any rebuke. And this one I remember hearing about in the Sacramento Bee. Was this movie is really delightful, really good. And I remember seeing this movie, and it's my first real introduction to Wes Anderson. I had seen Fantastic Mr. Fox before, but this is, I think, where I literally learned who Wes Anderson is and why he was a special filmmaker. And it also, the reason that it sold me is because at this time, Edward Norton is like quickly becoming my favorite actor to watch. I mean, after Fight Club, of course, The Incredible Hulk for me as a kid was my introduction to him. But just after all those works, I had just seen the movie that he does with Richard Gere, which I'm blanking on the name of. Yes, Primal Fear. So I'm like getting into him pretty heavily. And this film starts with him, and he's my favorite character in the film pretty easily. Every beat of comedy they do with him in this movie is, to me, flawless. Just from the introduction of him walking.
Yes.
It's such a great character introduction with great character beats that gets you the oddness of this character and a little bit of maybe even the just patheticness of this character. This guy who sees himself as a Boy Scout leader first and then math teacher second. It just gets into this world of like, who is this guy? And it shows you what allows, I guess, Sam to be the character that he is, that he has this relationship with a scoutmaster like this, who is so bizarre.
I went to Jewish summer camp for 12 years, and I was a camp counselor. And so part of me could relate to this character a little bit. I think we were very, very different and led the kids very, very differently. But yeah, there's always something hilarious about Norton. Like there's this, even in Fight Club, which I suppose is a satire anyways, but like there's something funny about him when he's kicking his own ass in his office in his boss's office or whatever. I think Norton is great in this. Would I call him my favorite character? he's up there. He's definitely top 3. And this is like probably a top 3 Wes Anderson movie for me, I think.
I would agree. This is definitely in my top 3. I think for me, it's definitely Royal Tenenbaums and this movie are there. The third one I'd have to think about. It'd probably be Fantastic or Grand Budapest. I was not a fan of French Dispatch. I
hated it.
Yeah, not in the slightest. That's the last film we're talking about. I'm a dreading it.
Guy, though. I do like Darjeeling a lot.
It's the one movie now I have not seen from him. We're covering it Friday for the show, so I'm like watching it this week.
Shoot me an email, let me know what you think, because that one with 3 brothers, I love that.
Yeah, for sure. That's, like I said, the one that I haven't been seeing, and it's the one that I've now just been, because I've had a few people who have told me Darjeeling is the one that like resonates with me emotionally.
Yes,
out of all of his ones.
I think it is most emotional.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to watch that. I think that point you make about Edward Norton being so funny, it's also based on who we know Edward Norton to be as a public figure, with maybe some of the stories that we have heard about him. And that's not me judging or putting anything on him. It's just he has a certain reputation in Hollywood for maybe not being the easiest guy to work with. So it's so funny to see him being willing to make fun of himself, and not necessarily make fun of the persona of Edward Norton himself, but just being able to make his character a joke.
It's funny. Norton definitely did have that reputation, but I don't know that he has it like anymore. That really does seem to have stuck to him. And I think, listen, any big star in Hollywood, you're going to not only want creative control, but they give you creative control to some extent, right? You're like the buck stops with you, even though you're not the director. You almost start to think, I understand why he got that reputation, but I don't know if it's deserved anymore.
I don't think it is either. And Birdman, to me, kind of represented him acknowledging that past reputation of him and maybe growing above it to a degree, because that's a very self-referential role that he takes in Birdman. But yeah, he is, to me, every little decision he makes, it just adds so much to this world. And it's also just maybe one of the last great Bruce Willis performances that we get recently. I mean, I'm a fan of Glass, and I think he's good in the movie, but he certainly hasn't delivered that type of performance often, definitely in the latter half of his career.
Yeah, no, he is really good. This is what happens when you step outside your comfort zone and you allow yourself to play against type with a director whose sensibilities you may not have had the chance to work with before. Like I don't think Bruce Willis has worked with anyone like Wes Anderson, really, and Wes gave him a chance to do something different, and I think it paid off.
Bruce Willis, Die Hard is one of my favorite action movies. Like I own basically every Bruce Willis film, from his TV show Moonlighting up until I think A Good Day to Die Hard is when I finally was just like, I can't buy every movie he comes out in anymore.
So you've seen Color of Night, Ben?
Which one is that?
Color of Night?
Is that the one where his penis is out?
Yes.
Yes, I have seen it. I don't remember. It's that thing where I just talked about, where my parents let me kind of see anything I wanted. So there were just filmmakers' filmographies who I just bought. Bruce Willis was one of them. So I know I've seen it. I can't tell you a detail about it besides that, just one random fact about it.
Just penis details. Got it.
Yeah, that's the only thing that comes off so wrong. That's the only factor of that movie that I remember.
Go back and watch that one, all right? Because that's a guilty pleasure of mine.
Guilty pleasure? Yeah, I'll have to check it out again. What I love what this movie starts off with is this relationship, because Wes Anderson definitely has a tendency to explore what he knows. And I like it when a director gets to make a filmography and movies based on something that he's lived through or knows. And for him, that's troubled childhood / parents of divorce, or parents who are, their marriage is on the rocks. And that's something he explores in Royal Tenenbaums and Life Aquatic, and this one as well. And what it does for me is it allows us to kind of see Wes Anderson progress as a director from where he starts, where I think this one has some of the softer moments in it with the parents. I think maybe even a decade before, the character of Frances McDormand's character would have been maybe a little bit harsher and maybe just a little bit more, not evil, because I don't think he's ever just truly made an evil mother in a film, but definitely way more cruel, it feels like, to the character of Susie. That's not what she is in this movie. And I just like to see how that basically from where we get oh my gosh, Ethelene Tenenbaum in Royal Tenenbaums to where we get to see Frances McDormand perform in there. I think there's a really beautiful arc of you getting to see a director come to terms with maybe not necessarily trauma, but just like growing and just accepting and learning from his past.
Sure, and that's definitely a through line in his work, and one that continues in Darjeeling, I think, which is about three boys trying to find their mother.
To you, what parts of the Susie Sam relationship do you start connecting the most with? Because for me, it takes a few scenes for me to really buy into this story that they're going on. And then once I'm sold, I'm sold. And that's always been kind of my tendency with Wes Anderson. It takes me a little bit to get in the world, but once I'm in the world, I'm usually sold.
I mean, I just love that first moment in like the field where they start unpacking the different things that they brought. And I think that those objects reveal so much about their characters. I love the actual like correspondence that they share.
Maybe my favorite scene in the movie is them going through the letters back and forth.
Yeah, I have like a framed thing. It's in storage because I haven't seen my belongings in 2 years. Where it's the two postcards, like one from Stan's stationery and one from Susie's and everything. Geez, I like how just like blunt Sam is too when he first sees her, at the play or whatever backstage, and I don't know. I don't know exactly when the moment is. I guess when she defends him too, right? When she takes out the scissors and defends him against Redford and the other scouts. You start to, because like it's always a little bit kind of more one-sided. I think that he's maybe more into her than she's into him, but then she proves herself as a girl.
He, as an actor, and I want to make sure I get his name right, so I'm pulling it up right now. I had it written down. Jared Gilman. He is so charismatic for a person who this is his first screen performance. And what I think that I liked about him so much was just what you talk about, that honesty, but just also an ability to, I think, sometimes he just gets to say Wes Anderson lines. And for some actors, that's a really hard thing to accomplish. For him, it kind of just comes through seamlessly.
He was a find for sure. You kind of look like.
Thank you. I thank you. That's the biggest compliment I think I've ever received on the show, that I look like a 12-year-old boy. He's one of those ones that I was like, right after watching it, I'm like, okay, he has to have jumped out like on screen since, and he's definitely been working since, but it's just weird that he hasn't been one of those guys that gets picked up, because I just figured he'd be a much bigger star.
No, I think he is one of those cases where it's like right place, right time, just like perfect look for this character. Could he have kept going? Sure, maybe he could have gone on to become like a David Krumholtz type or something. I don't know, but I there's something to be said for like these actors who come in and just like crush one movie, their first movie. There's like a purity about them. It's almost like they're not even acting in a way. His first kiss was the actor's actual first kiss, I believe. Sam's first kiss is Jared's first kiss. So is it something of a shame that he didn't go on to more? I suppose. I don't think Cara Hayward has really gone on to that much more either.
She's a little bit more television focused now.
Right. I know she's done a bit more than him, but it's not like she ever like popped or became some household name. They are just so intrinsically tied to this movie, and I kind of like that about that.
It definitely has a little bit of specialness, this movie, where it's just like they found the perfect actors. They brought them in for one thing, and then it's like, that's their one and done kind of swan song. There is something kind of beautiful to her career when it's just like, I made the perfect movie for me, and I don't have to really prove myself ever again because this movie is going to live on. Right. One of the questions I have for you, Jeff, and it's one that I've been exploring a bunch on this show, and it's this tendency of Wes Anderson to, and I want to be careful with this because I don't think this movie falls into the trap as maybe some of his other ones. He sometimes struggles to write female characters, I find, where sometimes I think they become objects to the main protagonist's story. Rosemary Cross from Rushmore, I think, falls into that trap a lot, but certainly Inez from Bottle Rocket. This film does it a little, not even a little. This one does it a lot better. But was there anything in this film that you watched where you're just like, maybe I would have changed some of the decisions, or maybe even just like, I don't think this maybe ages as well?
No, I read, so I read up on the Wikipedia and that I didn't realize back then that there was some sort of debate around when Sam touches her chest or something like that. It's like, what are we doing here, guys? These are 12-year-old kids. Like, everybody's touching everything, like that's no, I fumble around not doing anything. So I read those arguments though, where it's like, oh, this isn't going to age that well. And I disagreed.
I had the same feeling. And that was kind of the scene I was remembering, because you were a little bit older, obviously, when this movie comes out than I was. That was the biggest topic of discussion on all the parent boards.
Really?
Oh, yes. Boards, okay. All the parents boards. I remember Sacramento Bee published like an editorial piece about it, like an opinion piece. I remember seeing stuff in Entertainment Weekly, all this, like, and I was subscribing to Entertainment Weekly, where I was getting the magazine, every week. And I remember that just being the topic of discussion for this movie. And it was one that I'm just like, even as like someone 12, 13 who doesn't have opinion or say or thought in watching, I'm just like, what's the big deal about this scene? Like, I remember like getting it on DVD at Target, watching it, and kind of hiding it from watching it from my parents because I knew it had like such a controversy around it. And I knew they wouldn't care, but I just was like, I don't really want to have this discussion with my parents. And I remember watching the scene and just being like, that's the scene? That's the scene that just like causes all the controversy?
12 and 13-year-olds are like, doing God knows what, Yeah, like this is very tame. This is very 1965.
Yeah, and it's just like, I think the thing that like drove me crazy was there was somebody for Entertainment Weekly that I remember reading, and I don't recall their name at all, and I didn't even bother to look it up because who knows how they feel about it now. But they basically were accusing Wes Anderson of close to like, not child pornography, but like something of that essence. And I'm just like,
children or whatever. It's absurd. Listen, critics, media people, they all have to stir the pot or whatever. I don't even think that these people believe some of the things that they actually end up writing.
Yeah, totally.
They can stand by these pieces. It's just faux outrage. It's disingenuous. I don't think anybody could really be bothered or too upset by that scene. That is when you start exploring your sexuality, when you're 12 years old, when you hit middle school. So I just don't expect, how are we supposed to ignore physical touching and sensation and all that stuff when this is a movie about young romance? Like, they're feeling each other out, literally.
Totally agree. It's one of those things where it's like, no, that just feels very true to the story. And honestly, had you not had that scene in there, the relationship maybe doesn't feel as special because it doesn't feel as genuine to what 12 to like teenage emotion / puberty would be like at the time.
Critics don't like seeing sex and stuff because it reminds them how little sex there actually is. Okay. That is my theory. It's why they didn't like this Ben Affleck Ana de Armas movie either, Deepwater. Like,
I still need to see it. Is it worth it to watch?
I thought so, yeah. I mean, it's nothing great. I mean, it's a friggin' Hulu movie, right? But
Yeah,
I don't know what people were expecting. I think it delivers what it advertised.
yeah, I got to check that one out. I've been meaning to. It just this controversy when I was rereading about it, because I did look back into it today. It just reminded me so much of some of the discussions we're having on Licorice Pizza right now. And granted,
It does.
very different types of, I guess, quote unquote problematic issues in those movies. But like to me, it's just like, yeah, a film's supposed to be problematic. It's supposed to be provocative. Like you
Right.
don't like, I don't know. It's like, yeah, 1525. That's not like, it's not condoning the relationship. It's just sincerely saying like, this is just what the happened in the 1970s.
If you want a safe space, stay in your bedroom. Okay. The movie theater is not a safe space for people.
Yeah. And it drives me crazy when we have these discussions, because it's just like, can we not make something provocative or just that challenges audiences anymore? Just
Going back to like the Susie of it all. You probably brushed up on the Wikipedia like I did or whatnot, but I do think it was interesting that Kara Hayward sort of approached the character like a young Margot Tenenbaum. Like she saw, Margot as this woman with something to hide. Obviously, her mother in the movie, Frances McDormand, is having an affair or a fling of sorts with Bruce Willis and whatnot. And so this girl, she is ready to become a woman, right? She wants to act like an adult, and so she runs off and has this romantic affair with the 12-year-old from down the street. I think it makes perfect sense why Susie would do something like this and what she was trying to accomplish with it.
yeah, and it's so funny. I missed that part in the Wikipedia where she says she bases it off Gwyneth Paltrow, but that was going to be the point I brought up to you. She reminded me so much of a young Gwyneth Paltrow.
The eyes and everything.
It's the look, and I think that's such a great little nod for Wes Anderson, where it's like that's for the fans right there, where it's just like, oh, like this is supposed to remind you a little bit of Royal Tenenbaums, and maybe just subconsciously draw some of those emotions to those characters, where it allows that character to feel more lived in and special for me. What do you think, sir, of the choice? Sorry, not the choice. The actual filmmaking aspect that Wes Anderson brings into this movie, because I already mentioned it. To me, this is a very, what's the word for it? This is a film that doesn't look like quite any other Wes Anderson film, solely because it doesn't use these big set pieces. It's almost all entirely shot in nature. Did you think he was able to accomplish that in a really special way?
I think you're absolutely right that it does feel different. I mean, I don't know, like, with the production design of the Budapest Hotel and then the Indian stuff in Darjeeling, like his movies do tend to take on their own personality. I don't think everything necessarily looks the same. Even Life Aquatic with the ocean and everything. You're right though. They're out in the woods. It's like a Cub Scout movie. And it's bright and very like yellow is the color that I associate with this movie. Maybe it's the font. Maybe it's the tents. But I think this movie has a very specific color palette and design that I appreciate. And it does feel a little bit more open, and like you can breathe like you're in nature, as opposed to some of Wes's other movies, which feel very production design and every little piece of the frame is composed perfectly. Like you can't do that in nature, right?
That's what I love about it, is that detail that you mentioned right there, where it's just like everything's very open. Because specifically, I think what happens to Wes after it, and I'm a fan of Grand Budapest Hotel. What does specifically seem to come of this movie is we're getting to the point of just such large ensembles with Wes, where it's just like he packs everybody in it, and I'm gravitating away from those. I've noticed, even like Grand Budapest, which again I noticed it happens a little bit too much, and everything's just so specific with the set design and every little detail and making everything so eccentric and lived in, that I'm just like, maybe he loses a little bit of the story. That was personally, like I said, Grand Budapest maybe has hints of it. French Dispatch, I'm just like, this is somebody who wasn't told no and needed an editor to just say, no, this is not a good idea.
Right.
Moonrise to me kind of represents this nice transition point where we're getting to see a little bit of a larger ensemble cast with him, with a little bit even bigger famous actors than maybe typically seen. But it's also the nice reminiscence of, I think, some of his earlier films like Rushmore, Bottle Rocket, where it's just a very small scale story.
Right. It is a smaller story. I feel like he Royal Tenenbaums was a fairly, big name cast with Ben Stiller and Gene Hackman and whatnot. But you're right. As his career has progressed, the casts just get bigger and bigger and starrier and starrier. And I don't know that necessarily, I think it sometimes does a disservice to him. I think he sometimes leans on the cast a little bit too much, as he did with French Dispatch. And it sort of takes the focus away from his creativity.
Yeah, totally agree. And
the actors become a crutch.
Yeah, it's some things where I just noticed where I think this is a really nice middle point where you're getting some of the earlier small scale storytelling of Wes with a little bit bigger of the maybe cast list. Again, you're right. Royal Tenenbaums and Steve Zissou certainly have it. It just doesn't feel like, maybe this is the first time because it's like, oh, Bruce Willis is in a movie, and it just doesn't feel like Bruce Willis would have done this movie 10 years earlier,
right,
in his career. That's the point that I was bringing up with that specifically. I really like Bruce Willis's character in this movie, and I say that basically about most of the characters in this movie, that I really like this. To me, this is such an emotional story that he gets to have with this boy Sam. One of my favorite just little moments that the two characters have is where Bruce Willis just gives him a beer, just lets him sip on the beer. It's just like, that's a really just simple dad and son relationship, just bond right there, where most people who have a dad have had that moment in their life, and it's just like, yeah,
right. Not at 12 though, and I like that he's like doesn't really know what to do with this kid, but he knows that, like, yeah, father, is supposed to introduce his kid to beer or whatever. It just felt to me like a guy who has never really dealt with kids that much, all of a sudden finds himself having to take care of a kid. And I love, the end of this movie too, where he's like, you can come live with me. I mean, that is really emotional, and it feels earned as well.
Agreed. And were you not one of those kids who was drinking beer at 12 from their parents? The parents letting them sip on a beer?
I actually wasn't.
Really?
And I don't really like to drink now. I'm just not a big drinker. And fortunately, my dad wasn't either. I think my grandfather was a big drinker. So that's why dad wasn't, and why we aren't either.
Yeah, I'm not a big drinker either. I do specifically, though, remembering, I think by the age of 12, I had that moment of just like sipping a beer with my dad, like in Mexico.
I probably
go on family vacation.
It out.
I didn't particularly like the taste. I'm not a beer guy at all. Give me soda any day of the week. Yes. Here's the interesting part of this movie where the parts of this movie that I've always struggled with watching it, and I've had some of the same issues, is if there was one criticism I'd have to this movie, I think the character of Mr. and Mrs. Bishop are a little underwritten. I think the point more specifically with Bill Murray's character, he doesn't feel like he gets to do a lot besides be the husband that's being cheated on. I think I wanted maybe just one more scene of just like him talking to his daughter, just to maybe close that, because I think Frances McDormand gets that. She gets that in the bathtub when she's cleaning up Susie. I think that's the moment that solidifies that relationship to me. Mr. Bishop's character, I never had that moment with him where I'm just like, I wanted something a little bit more from this relationship.
Yeah, no, I think that those are both fair. That's the problem with, big ensemble movie. Not everyone's going to get equal screen time, or someone's going to end up getting the shaft a little bit. And this isn't like a terribly long movie. I probably would have watched it for another half an hour. But Wes's movies, I feel like he has a pretty good sense of pacing and running times. Like, I think it would be really easy for him to make an indulgent movie, but I don't know. He keeps things moving. But yeah, given the size of the cast here, I think that yes, some people are just going to get a little shortchanged.
Yeah, it's of characters though that just get to pop in. My favorite, maybe just cameo in this movie, Jason Schwartzman. I forgot he was in this movie, and when he comes in as Cousin Ben, to me, that was just, again, just a scene where a character just gets to come in, he gets to shine for a few minutes, and then he just gets to leave the film without anything else. What Jason Schwartzman's character does in this movie, it's again just perfect comedic timing. And obviously it's based on the fact that Schwartzman and Wes Anderson have this working relationship that allows that to be this special. But yeah, he was the aspect of the movie I just forgot that was in it. I'm just like, how did I forget this? He's so good in this movie. There is a certain cartoonishness to this movie that I actually do quite appreciate. I like that it takes a little bit more of this whimsical feel, like the scene where the kids are getting struck by lightning. When I was rewatching it, what it felt like to me is it felt like Wes Anderson almost doing like the Adventures of Huck Finn or Tom Sawyer, where it's just these two kind of this imaginary, not imaginary world, but just kind of this playful world where these characters go on these really weird exotic journeys together. And it's just like they each meet certain characters throughout. That's what I really liked about the storytelling in this film, where it's just like, I liked how like just breezy it is. It's just like you get scenes in the film throughout where it's just like beat by beat by beat, where it's really easy to watch.
I did like those theatrical flourishes, those sort of creative flights of fancy that you're talking about, like the lightning and whatnot. It gives it kind of like a homemade feel, almost like Jason Schwartzman's plays in Rushmore.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great call.
Yeah, it reminds me of that a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's moments like that where I just think the world is so easily lived in, and it feels nostalgic in those moments where it does just kind of feel like not a kid's story, but it's just a story made for just young adults. It feels very nostalgic. Like that feels like a beat where it's just like, oh yeah, my friend got struck by lightning and they blew up, like all that.
And the books that she reads, right? The children's books that Susie brings with her, like that, I think, helps conjure that feeling of nostalgia. The old records, that she's into, just like some of the fashion in the film as well. This movie's from another time, even though like when I read today that it was set in 1965, I was almost taken aback because I felt like this could almost be a very modern movie, albeit someplace where like, in a part of New England that maybe hasn't caught up with the rest of, modern times or something, like, or the island people, the people who live down on Cape Cod year round.
No, agree. It does feel like if you were to just say this film was shot in 2012, there doesn't feel like any beats that are like, oh, this is like overly like 1960s in style. Right. So I do appreciate it because it gives it a timeless feel to it. Jeff, going on our show right now, we have a tournament where it's a 64-man tournament, March Madness style. We have 64 Wes Anderson characters in this tournament, all battling out to determine who is the best Wes Anderson movie. This episode's going to come out a little bit later in the tournament, so I don't have a specific matchup for you, but I do just want to ask. I know for a fact, one, Sam and Susie are now destined to meet in round 2. They both won round 1 pretty easily. Who are you voting for?
From all the Wes Anderson characters?
No, specifically for Sam versus Susie. That matchup, who do you get to the Sweet 16?
Sam.
You get Sam?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm leaning towards Susie, but okay. It's like 51-49 for me. It was pretty cruel. I did randomization for first 8 were selected, the bottom 8 were random, and it just happened to be that Sam and Susie were going to meet up in the second round. Funny. But yeah, is there any character in Moonrise Kingdom that you believe could maybe make a strong run, even like doesn't matter the matchup, just this character that you feel like has a really strong contention that just like you think the fans are going to gravitate towards them?
Snoopy?
Snoopy is not in the tournament.
Honestly, I don't think so.
You don't?
I don't necessarily think so. I feel like because I don't know which character would be Ed Norton's. I mean, could it be social services?
Yeah, to me right now, it's Ed Norton has maybe the most logical sense. I think it's a fun film. It's also really the only Ed Norton role within Wes Anderson that got like, I think his character in Grand Budapest and Isle of Dogs is on there, but there's such miniature roles within it.
You know who it is? Okay, I know who it is for this.
Okay, who?
You know who it is? It's probably Bob Balaban.
Can I tell you something shocking? He is not in the tournament.
I mean, that's fair. He's the narrator. Like he doesn't. You don't really know much about him, right? He's narrating somebody else's story. But when I think about, like, there's something about a narrator that is very Wes Anderson, and to see him physically embodied, right? Because there's a narrator in Royal Tenenbaums, right? Alec Baldwin,
yeah.
You don't see him, right?
We never see him. And right. I think same with Fantastic.
Right. So to have an actual narrator who looks very distinct in the way that he's framed as well at the bottom of the frames and stuff, I feel like that may be the character who I pluck out of this movie and like put him in the Wes Anderson Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I think Ed Norton has that justification just solely because I could see fans just voting towards him, where it's just like, well, this is the one film he's being representative. This is the one that we're going to vote him in. He has this weird matchup at the first round where he's facing Rosemary Cross from Rushmore, which is so that's a weird one to get over because I actually feel like she could make it fairly far. But yeah,
there's no Eli Cash in this movie, Ben. There's no Eli Cash.
There is no Eli Cash. There is no Royal Tenenbaum. There's not even a Zero in this film. Right. Before we go and wrap up our discussion on Moonrise Kingdom, I always ask my guests favorite scene in the movie, just point blank.
Favorite scene in the movie. It's probably something involving Redford and the Scouts.
Is it that opening scene? I'm tempted to say the opening scene too. I'm not going with.
Although I love Jason Schwartzman, so that cousin Ben stuff is also really good. The cousin Ben stuff.
The marriage scene is so funny, like so underratedly funny in like Wes Anderson's career.
I might have to go with that initial walkthrough through Camp Ivanhoe with the Scouts and everything, and just getting the lay of the land and seeing the different, how they live, who these kids are. I don't know. I had a blast with that. Yeah,
it's a great scene. I am going the scene where it's the letters back and forth. I think it's just my favorite moment in the film, and it's one that I think solidifies both those characters for me. Jeff, that is our discussion on Moonrise Kingdom. Before we get to our debate question, was there anything you want to mention before we wrap up this on Moonrise? It's the floor is all yours.
I don't think so. I just I think a big part of this movie is going to be like, when you first see it. So you were a little bit younger, and so maybe it had more of an impact. But I feel like, I don't know. I was 10 years older than you, and it worked its charms on me. It took me back to my middle school days, and I just think there is something very special about it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because for me, I was their age when I'm watching this movie. So for me, it's not even that like kind of feeling of nostalgia when I'm rewatching this movie. It's just simply like, oh yeah, like I remember this. Like when I watched this movie, I was living through this.
Right. This is me now.
Yeah. So that's like definitely like a cool thing to see in this movie. And with that, guys, we are wrapping up our discussion on Moonrise Kingdom and leading to my favorite part of the show, which we call the Great Debate. And this is where I have a question prep for Jeff. Jeff, did you prep a question for me?
I didn't. I may have forgotten that part. I'm good at coming up with questions. That's my job. So give me the lay of the land one more time.
So the Great Debate is, I have a question prep for you, and the guest has a question. We go out, we duke it, and we find out who has the better answer. We'll get responses back. Usually it's never me. So
this is a question that I have an answer to already, or is like,
here's how I'll lay it out. I'll just give you my question so you have an idea.
All right.
My question for you is, name a actor and an actress who have not worked with Wes Anderson that you would like to see.
I did do that.
Okay.
In fact, I wrote it down. Okay. Name an actor or actress. So I'm answering this, or I'm asking you, or I see. This is just your question to me.
Yeah, this is my question. I have an answer for it as well, but I'll let you start off with because you prepared this.
I have a few.
Okay, go for it because I have a few as well.
The first one, I'm gonna have Tom Cruise switching from Paul Thomas Anderson Magnolia to coming into and to do a Wes Anderson movie. I would love to see Tom Cruise, and I would love to see Jake Gyllenhaal as well.
Jake Gyllenhaal is a great pull.
I think he would get it like Norton would.
I agree.
Female wise, it was a little bit trickier, but I mean, I really do think Nicole Kidman is a great actress, and it would be interesting to see her in a Wes Anderson movie because she hasn't worked with him, right? I feel like he's worked with everybody but Nicole Kidman, right?
Nicole Kidman is not in a Wes Anderson film because she's not in Darjeeling. Yeah, I went through the list. I can't think of a single one unless she's a voice actress in like Fantastic Mr.
So yeah, Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman with maybe Jake Gyllenhaal, and then if I had to do like a character actor, I love Shea Wiggum, and I think Shea Wiggum would slot perfectly into Wes Anderson's universe.
Are you pitching a movie where Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman reunite?
That would be epic.
That would be epic.
By the way, I didn't even realize that I had said Kidman they were married once.
It's just the mind of Sneider.
Wow. It's so weird. I don't even think of them as like a couple. It's and yet they were one of our most famous. Now I have a question for you, huh?
Yes, I'll answer the question as well, the one that I just offered. I had a few names. Specifically, I think for female, I would like to see Anne Hathaway take that kind of leap. I think she could do it really well. I love Kristen Stewart. I think she has kind of that tone and vibe that I think would suit a Wes Anderson film very well. And finally, I would have Viola Davis. Is just a name that I'm just like, I just love when I see an actor or actress do something that I'm just not accustomed to. And I think she would be a really weird, fun addition to it. And we get to show comedy, which I think Viola Davis is really good at, but doesn't get to showcase a lot. And for actor
answers,
what was that?
Those are good answers. Oh,
thank you. And for actor, I have two, one of them being my gosh, why am I blanking on his name right now? I'll have to come back to him. Oh, Bill Hader.
Yes, you would be great.
Bill Hader, I think, just has that same kind of eccentricities that would suit them so well. I'd love to see Ben Stiller return. It saddens me that Chas Tenenbaum is his only role within a Wes Anderson film because it's one of my favorites. But the number one answer to me has to be Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. You won this assignment. You did better than it.
I thought your answers were great. I mean, you're reuniting two of Hollywood's most powerful couple. To quote Scott Mantz, iconic, put them together. I love it. Also, just a quick shout out. Simon Rex is another guy. I just watched Red Rocket last week.
He was really good in that.
He's really good in that movie. So that is my answer. Jeff, do you have your question?
I do.
All right, sir.
Okay, it's a two-part question.
Two-parter.
If Wes Anderson was going to direct a movie, right? Who would you like to see write the screenplay? And vice versa, if Wes Anderson was only going to write a movie, who would you like to see direct that movie?
Oh, freak. That's a great question. So who do I want to see write a screenplay for Wes Anderson? You know what? I'm going to embrace the Coda love for a second. You're going to have to pronounce her name for me. Is it Siam Hader?
Sian Hader or Sean Hader.
I loved what she did with Coda, and I think there's a vibe of Coda that kind of gets to touch on some of that young, just personal feeling to it that I think there's a partnership there that would work really well. And I also specifically want to go female because I have had a few criticisms with how Wes Anderson writes female characters. I'd like to see a female in there and kind of bring their input. Greta Gerwig could also be another really good answer for that. I would think
Greta Gerwig as well.
And in terms of director, so this is Wes is writing the screenplay for a director.
Right. So Wes has written a script, but he's like, I really don't want to direct. I got to take a year off from directing. Who am I giving the script to make it?
God, that's a really tough question. I'm going to go, and I don't think this would actually be my answer, but this is just the name that occurred in the mind, because I was thinking of movies where I think they're beautifully directed, but maybe the director isn't being told no right now. And they're just kind of getting to self-indulge themselves. I saw Malcolm and Marie about a month or two ago, probably actually longer at this point. That movie is so beautifully shot and so self-indulgent. Just the whole monologue of 15 minutes of Washington just yelling about critics. I was so put off by scenes like that I would like to see Sam Levinson continue to direct a movie, but maybe have someone come in to rein him back on maybe some of his tendencies. So I'd like to see what Wes Anderson can do with a Sam Levinson as a director.
I like it.
Do you have a name for a director that you'd like to see? Are you going David Fincher? I thought about it. I didn't, but
No, I don't think I'd want to see David Fincher directing a Wes Anderson movie.
You don't want to see a serial killer just that's doing everything really tidy?
Did you ever see the SNL Wes Anderson parody?
Yes, that one's so well done. So funny.
Geez, who would I want to see direct a Wes Anderson movie? Part of me is thinking Noah Baumbach, but part of me thinks that's like a little too easy.
Yeah, with the fact that he did Life Aquatic and Fantastic.
Yeah. Wes Anderson. I don't know.
You don't know? So let me ask you this. Do you want to see him ever do a horror film? Like Wes do like Scream 6, maybe not that film, but something like that, a Halloween, anything like that. You don't want to see Wes Anderson work in that slasher genre?
No, I think of Wes Anderson as a comedy guy. And I don't need him to be making like Judd Apatow movies or whatever, but I think I'd like to, get a good natured movie, like once or every other year from him. I don't need him to go full like Oscar bait drama or even genre horror or anything like that.
That's fair. There is a part of me that would be curious to see what a Wes Anderson horror film looks like. I threw out Scream just solely because I'm like, I wasn't the hugest fan of the recent Scream movie. And I'm like, okay, maybe they could inject actual comedy, which I thought was at times lacking in this newest one, where I'm like, I thought maybe Wes Anderson, but I agree. Overall, I don't think I'd actually want to see it. It's one of those weird like thought assignments you think of, and then the more you think about it, you're like, I don't actually want to see that.
Yeah.
But I fully agree. The one name that I could not remember, Jeff, that I did remember is John C. Reilly. I'd love to see John C. Reilly work with Wes. Are you watching Showtime right now?
Yeah, Winning Time. They changed.
Winning Time.
Yes, it's. I've seen 8 episodes. It's great.
Oh, okay. You saw all 8. I am on. Is it being released weekly or is it out all?
Yeah, no, it's weekly, and I think that there's 10. So I haven't seen the whole show yet, but it's really very good.
Yeah. Okay. I'm on episode 2 or 3 right now, and I'm definitely liking this more than I've liked some of the other Adam McKay's recent projects. But with that all said, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I just want to give you a second to plug anything that you would like to, anything that you're working on, anything that you just want the people to know about.
If you're an Academy voter, vote for Coda. No, I am writing for the Ankler these days. If you guys have some spare pocket change, please consider getting a subscription. We just dropped the news of when you'll be able to see the Avatar 2 trailer. BTLnews.com. That's the day job. Below the line, you'll see all kinds of fun interviews with artisans and the craftsmen who make all these movies that we love. And then my column over on LA Magazine, the Hollywood Heat Index, where I chronicle who's hot and who's not each week in the town. That's about it. The Sneider on Twitter. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Blogspot.com, which is a great resource. Thank you, Ben. That's really one of the nicest compliments I've heard, because I try to keep it very up to date. I keep it very meticulous, and I'm glad that you noticed and appreciate it.
Listen, when I'm doing my own on my own website, I do the same thing on beniverse.com, where I'm just like, I'm ranking it. And then when I was designing it like a year ago, I'm like, God damn it, I just stole Jeff's exact format. So I was just like, I was changing it around a little bit.
It's a weird format. People, first of all, you got Letterboxd these days. Everybody's rating on a 5-star system, which
it's groupthink.
It would have Roger Ebert rolling in his grave. Okay. So I still do 4 stars, and I know that I categorize it into like standouts and good and guilty pleasures. And Drew McWeeny, who's probably one of my favorite critics,
brilliant guy,
hates the term guilty pleasures, hates that I would feel guilty about liking a movie, but it's like, listen, this is just this is the system that works for me. And Blogspot is a system that works for me.
Yeah,
I
agreed.
How ridiculous I sound with a Blogspot address. I probably sound like I'm 60 years old, but it works for me and it helps me keep everything organized.
No, I totally agree. And guilty pleasure is that weird term because I have that same one where I was like, I had last year, I actually, for some reason, enjoyed the Addison Rae movie, He's All That. I'm like one of the 10 who probably did enjoy that movie, and the only one that was above the age of 18 and male. But that was the thing where I'm like ranking, and I'm like, okay. And people got pissed when I made my every film I watched in 2021, and I had that like 30 spots above Power of the Dog and Don't Look Up. People were livid at me.
People don't understand the way the rankings work. It's like
preferential.
I liked this Ben Affleck movie, right? But I'm not going to call it a good movie. I know enough to know, okay, this is probably not a good movie, but I like it, so it's guilty pleasure.
I'm going to rewatch this movie again, but I can admit that Jane Campion directed a better movie than Power of the Dog. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to watch He's All That about 100 times before I ever choose to watch Power of the Dog. This is becoming a Power of the Dog like hate manifesto for me, so I should probably cut it off. But
that's the time, exactly. We'll back away from the laptops.
Yes, so that's where I'll end. One last plug that I have to give it to you because friend Scott Mance has also been on this show. FYC, for your consideration on Perry Nemiroff's channel, just had an episode today, which I still have to watch. I have it on queue. Great show. Love the show. If you're an Oscar fan.
I think I'm wearing the same shirt. So yes, I taped it on the same day, guys. And yeah, we have an episode coming out on Wednesday. That'll be our final predictions. So be sure to tune in. Perfect.
And with that all said, my name is Ben from the Beniverse here at Ben and Bran See a Movie. Thank you for joining me, Jeff. I hope to have you back sometime in the future.
When you do Fincher or Tarantino, you give me a call.
I already did 7, but I will keep you in mind for when we do Zodiac.
Okay, yeah, that sounds.
No, actually, I know you're a Mank fan. I believe. For those who are listening audio, Jeff just flipped me off. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining me. You've been awesome. Guys, thank you for following. Follow me on the Beniverse. You know where I'm at. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.